Hi everybody, welcome to IndyCar on Wednesday the 26th of June 2019. Today the news is full of stories about the two hopefuls, Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt, and their bid to become the leader of the new leader of the Tory party and the last person to be in charge of the United Kingdom while it's still in the EU. Now, one of the problems at the moment that we face is this continuing Cold War between the United Kingdom government and the Scottish government, and it's got to a new low level recently when Jeremy Hunt announced that he was going to cut the funding which the First Minister relies upon for her foreign trade visits, which she makes on a fairly regular basis to represent the interests of Scottish businesses. A legitimate expenditure, you would think, to travel as First Minister, the leader of the country, the elected leader of the Scottish people, to trade fairs and to trade talks across Europe and around the world. Except that Jeremy Hunt, who is not even the Prime Minister actually yet, he's just a hopeful, has decided to cut, I think it was £20,000 off Nicola Sturgeon's budget for her recent trips. And to prevent her from using things like state cars, basically using British government equipment to drive around cities where the UK has ambassadors and embassies, and where the equipment and the transport is available to take people like Nicola Sturgeon or other devolved assembly or parliament leaders to trade talks. But for somebody like Jeremy Hunt to deliberately sabotage the First Minister's efforts to build trade for Scotland is a case of pettiness in the extreme. Because really what Jeremy Hunt is doing is using Scotland's, or risking Scotland's trading links in a game of tit for tat and party political point scoring, basically trying to trip up the First Minister by claiming that she's using these trade trips as a way of promoting independence. Now, nobody needs to promote independence. Independence is the natural state of every country in every part of the world. So it's not necessary to promote it. It's very obvious to all the countries where the First Minister visits that Scotland is entitled to become independent if it votes to do so. So therefore there's no need for Nicola Sturgeon to campaign for this in other parts of Europe or anywhere else for that matter. But it's indicative now of the way that and I have to choose my words carefully here, the English government, to give it its distinction, the English government and the Scottish government are now locked in a kind of Cold War where there is no campaign for independence ongoing at the moment, but there is a campaign for Brexit which has been won, and we're still waiting for that Brexit to happen. And we're still waiting for a Tory leader who has enough courage to actually see through the Brexit which their party engineered. So this Cold War that's going on is another symptom of the diverging paths of both the Scottish state and the English state in their ambitions to do completely different things. The English government wishes to isolate itself, but not only that, but it's now trying to isolate Scotland from its trade partners. Now this is very similar to the kind of thing that an abusive partner would do to a spouse that they are bullying, by trying to isolate them from their friends, isolate them from their families, so that they can be manipulated and bullied into doing what the larger partner wants to do. And this is a parallel which is not lost on many people, I'm sure. At the moment, this is just another one of these provocations, I think we'd have to call them, by the Tories, trying to provoke Nicola Sturgeon into making some kind of rash move. It's not going to happen. But I also know that people are that worried about it that one lady in particular contacted me yesterday to say that she was announcing a crowdfunder for Nicola Sturgeon to raise the 20,000 shortfall caused by Mr Hunt's intervention. Now, I've put a link up on my page to this crowdfunder, but before we all start to chip into this, it might be worth checking just to see if the Scottish Government has already managed to fill in that shortfall. Remember, there are surplus funds left over at the end of the year sometimes from Scotland's prudent governing, where there are little bits and pieces of cash left over, if you like, down the back of the sofa, which have not been spent. This is just simply because of changing circumstances at the end of the financial year. So there may well be ample money left over in contingency funds to fill in this shortfall that Jeremy Hunt has caused. So just before we start giving to this crowdfunder, let's just have a look and fact check and see what the Scottish Government has done to respond to Jeremy Hunt's actions yesterday. Now, the other thing that's appeared in the news today that caught my attention was the fact that, according to the BBC, a quarter of Scotland's children live in poverty. Now, this is a bit of a shocking figure. I recall from the 1970s and 1980s that during Thatcher's worst excesses, when Scotland's industries were being sold off and closed down, and there was mass unemployment, that unemployment resulted in 1 in 10 people being unemployed, the so-called 10%, 1 in 10. But if you think about it now, if there are 25% of Scotland's children are living in poverty, then that means 1 in 5, at least, or maybe 1 in 4 households has not got enough money to live on properly, is living at or just below the poverty line. Now that's a shocking figure, because it could well be that that household has one or even more than one wage earner in it. But the fact is that wages are too low and the work is too insecure for that family to have enough money for the basic essentials of life. And so these children are faced with living in work poverty, which is a completely new form of poverty invented by the Conservative government by its complete deregulation of the labour market, making it easy for companies to simply hire and fire people on a whim without any justification whatsoever, and making it possible for companies to employ people on contracts which don't guarantee any regular hours at all. So the country is getting worse. The Tories have ushered in a period where a quarter of Scotland is effectively living in poverty. Now that is an astonishing admission. The BBC made this this admission, if you like, today, this piece of news, without any comment, without any fact-checking, and without any editorial, and without any analysis of why it was happening. And yet they go full-blooded for the Scottish NHS again today by claiming that there's a bullying problem in the Scottish NHS. And this is part of the pattern of BBC attacking the Scottish NHS every single week on some matter or other. They now have a BMA doctor saying that there is a bullying problem across the Scottish NHS, and it's being caused by being forced to meet targets. Now, you have to remember that being forced to meet targets was a Tory invention, not a Scottish Government one. The Scottish Government sets higher standard of targets than they do in England. And the claim is from this doctor in the BMA that this is causing an increase in bullying. The figures were that 510 bullying incidents had occurred in the Scottish NHS in the past 5 years. Now, if you think about that for a moment, we're talking about about 110 allegations of bullying every year across the Scotland's largest employer, which employs, I think it's 90,000 people, something like that. So a huge industry, if you like, involved in looking after people's health. And of those 90,000 people, only 110 incidents of bullying in a year. Now that's the ones that have been reported. We don't know what they are. There's no detail of what they are. There's no detail of what caused these, and there's no detail about how they were dealt with. So it's just, again, another one of these attacks by the BBC on the Scottish NHS, trying again to make the Scottish NHS look worse than it is, because it's so much better than the English NHS, as we all know. So where does that leave us? Well, this week it leaves us precisely where we were the week before, which is stuck in Brexit limbo and waiting for something to happen. We're always waiting for the other shoe to drop with Brexit, and we're no nearer finding this out. All we find out this week is that Boris Johnson likes to make model buses out of old fruit crates as his hobby. Baffling though that might sound, this is actually probably the most mundane hobby I've ever heard from any UK politician, but Should it surprise us? No, not really. Apparently Boris is quite arty and creative, and in his spare time he likes to build models of little people and put them in these little bus models that he builds. And that's his way of unwinding after a long, hard day of lying and misleading people. So, brilliant for Boris. So we're now at the stage where Scotland and England are basically involved in an unofficial Cold War, a phony war where no independence referendum has yet been called. There's the threat of one. No Brexit has yet actually been achieved, although it's been voted for. No Tory leader has yet been elected, although the two have been shortlisted. We now have to wait 2 weeks for some peculiar reason to wait for a few 100,000 ballot papers to be posted out to Tory members, and for them to put a cross in one of them, put it in an envelope and send it back apparently takes the better part of a month. So we have to wait until somewhere around the 22nd of July to find out which of these two millionaire Tory Eton educated lads is actually going to lead the United Kingdom through the Brexit process and beyond, and we still don't know what that will be, and they're still carrying on as though they can renegotiate the deal, which the European Union has said can't be renegotiated. And so it's the summer of the silly season stories now, and the last I saw from the BBC's own website was that in the Highlands there was a deer playing football, and I think there was another animal doing something else which is rather strange as well, but it's always the same at this time of year. You get the silly season stories because news is so thin on the ground. Anyway, that's about it for today. I wish there was something more interesting to tell you today, but unfortunately, you know, you're talking about the Tories and the BBC here, and what's interesting to them is not necessarily of any importance to us up here in Scotland. Apart from this comment that Ross Thompson has made about how Boris Johnson is going to swat away the Scottish nationalists like midgies, I can't imagine in any world where Boris Johnson could swat away midgies anyway. I mean, you can't swat away midgies for a start. There's far too many of them. You get a cloud of midgies around you, you've got tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of them, and you can't swat them away. They won't let you go. They will just eat you alive. And I'm afraid Boris Johnson, if he thinks he's going to swat away the nationalists, he's got another thing coming. Anyway, this Cybernat is heading off now to do some real work. I will be, I hope, giving another show of I'll be hosting another show of Scotland at 7 tomorrow evening. Then I'm on holiday for a week. So you won't hear from me for a week. Don't panic. I haven't been assassinated by MI5. I am, in fact, just taking my family for a holiday. I will return in a week's time. I'll be back in Scotland again around about the 7th of July. So don't panic if you don't hear any posts from me for a week. I haven't been nobbled. I have, in fact, just gone on holiday. Anyway, I will make probably one more broadcast tomorrow, and then there'll be Scotland at 7, and then it will be radio silence for a week or so. So I'm afraid you will have to entertain yourselves for the 7 days from about the 28th of this month until the 7th of July. Anyway, I'll see you all later. Bye bye for now.